to do justice to our discussion, we actually have in the studio Dr. Sam Oguche, and he is the coordinator, Center for Legislative Engagement, YAGA Africa. Good morning, Doctor, and thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Of the season.
Thank you.
All right, so taking a look at the report, that the EU actually came out with, we would like to know your thoughts, your general thoughts on this.
Yes, election observation generally is part of the rituals of democracy. It's a global practice. And when you have election observation, whether it is a domestic observation or international one like the EU did, you expect to have reports. And when you have reports, it's not a fault-finding mission, but to bring out clearly what you saw in the electoral process. It involves pre-election stage, election stage, and even post-election stage as well. So at the end of the day, what you have is to help the stakeholders, especially the umpire, election commission, in our own case, the INEC, to improve the electoral process, to perform better. So if you look at the EU report, I can say there is nothing surprising in it. These are issues that CSOs had even raised. Reports before the EU, have all those things. And there is nothing that the EU said that is out of place. So as far as we are concerned, it's a welcome development, and the report speaks to the issues.
Right. And what are some of your takeaways from the report? I suppose you've taken a look at it, some of the recommendations, the general overview of the elections. What are some of your takeaways from the recommendations?
Yes, the striking thing for me is the trust of Nigerians in the INEC, the commission. If you look at the report and you look at issues before the election, you find out that Nigerians have this lack of trust in INEC. And how does it affect the elections? If I don't believe that you are going to do justice, then it's as well as I shouldn't go before you. So what strikes me, what strikes me in the report is the preparedness of INEC. INEC had all it wanted, the funds, the resources. In fact, this is the first time that materials were printed locally. So it tells us that, look, one, the appointment process in INEC, because why Nigerians seem to have that trust deficit is the people that make up this INEC. And these are the commissioners, the resident electoral commissioners, the national commissioners. Not all, some of them. And if you look at the run-up to the elections, when the president made some appointments, even the CSOs, YAGA Africa, they cried out. There are some of these people with partisan background. INEC, as the name implies, is independent. By the time you start having people with partisan background, with tainted record, you are already bringing the neutrality and independence of INEC to question. We know these are mostly, most of the time, outside the control. They are exogenous. INEC does not have control over them. But these are things to address in the electoral process. It's fundamental.
All right, Doctor, you actually talked about some of the weaknesses, that was actually detailed in the report. But what about some of the strengths and opportunities, in that particular report? Which of them do you think INEC should actually capitalize on before the next election cycle?
Yes, election technology. The use of BVAS and IREV was to improve election integrity or electoral integrity, put it that way. But the BVAS functioned very well when you talk about accreditation. But let's take the presidential elections. It was when we got to the issue, the stage of transmission, that it started having issues. And if you look at the report, it's one of the recommendations. Real-time access to results, transmission. So I think whatever explanation INEC has to give us as to why we had that monumental failure should be addressed. Because why many people came out to register and participate in the electoral process was the assurance by the commission that BVAS, IREF were going to be functional. So if people had this high hope in this election technology and their hopes were dashed, and these things have come out in reports, then it calls INEC to be on its toes. INEC must be awake to cover this. What are the challenges? Where did you get it wrong? If you make adequate preparations ahead of forthcoming elections, we still have off-cycle elections, then we can get it right. So it's not an audit of INEC, it's not to assess INEC, but to tell INEC where the weaknesses are, where the strengths are. I think election technology was, a major innovation that I go with.
We heard Mr. Festus Okoye's response there, Barrister Festus Okoye's response there to the report being presented by the observation mission from the EU. And right before the 2023 general elections, President Muhammadu Buhari, or former President Muhammadu Buhari, signed the amended act into law. And it was supposed to be a game changer. And by all accounts, this was the most expensive election ever conducted in the history of this country because of the technology deployed, because of the facilities that we had to put in place, logistic-wise and everything. Would you say that in hindsight, we Nigerians have gotten value for money or otherwise, especially if you take into context the report from internal assessment by CSOs, organizations like yours, and now the EOM is also just confirming what Nigerians already know?
Now, if you look at it, what the president did, in fact, what we had in 2022 was a new electoral act. The Electoral Act 2010, which had been amended, on a few occasions, was repealed. So we had a new legal framework for the conduct of the 2023 general elections. And looking at the law, there are some complexities. The law. In fact, you could even see it from the moment legislators showed themselves out of the list of delegates. When you talk of statutory delegates, and they enacted this law, but they showed themselves. So you could see the problems from the beginning. Now,
a good problem or a bad problem?
No, it is a bad one indeed, because if you have that, what they were trying to avoid actually took place. So we won't go into that. But looking at the response of Barrister Festus Okoye, I would say that INEC, being the umpire, shouldn't be seen telling citizens how it should be assessed. There are parameters for assessment. In fact, there are global practice. And we can even assess INEC by the guidelines, the targets it set for itself before the election. You say you are going to transmit. Did you? The answer is no. You say you are going to. And then you even...
Well, for the February 25th poll, that was an issue. But
yes.
For the other elections...
But what mattered most to Nigerians in the 2023 general election was the presidential election. Now, that's why we are saying INEC did very well in many respects, but also failed, and that it must acknowledge. That look, you didn't get it well here, you got it well there. And when your weaknesses are pointed out, it is for INEC to take those things and prepare to overcome those weaknesses, not to be defensive.
All right, so while we're still actually talking about the Electoral Act, in your opinion, are there parts of the Electoral Act that you think need to be amended or needs to be looked into before the next cycle elections?
Now, if you look at the Electoral Act, you can even do a kind of surgery on the Act. Because looking at it from the perspective of inclusivity, the EU report flagged it. Women participation. What is the level playing ground? As it is now, if you don't make it by way of legislation, political parties will not. In fact, we have had instances where some women got party tickets, but they were substituted. If these things are not provided in a legislation like the Electoral Act, it will continue. Why do you think in a Senate composed of 109 senators, we have only 3 women? What are persons with disability? How many of them?
But doesn't that also boil down to the politics of the situation? Because at the end of the day, it is down to the voters to decide who they want to represent them, because we still have people who are disabled, who are women on the ballot on election day. But are you suggesting in any way that INEC's conduct of the election might have worked to the disadvantage of these people? Is that what you're saying?
No. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the law itself must provide the foundation in a way that political parties will be put on their toes, to ensure internal party democracy.
So you're saying it's not enough to give women 50% discount on the forms?
No.
You're saying it's not enough to give disabled people free nomination forms?
It's not enough.
What else can they do?
It's not enough. Okay, if you give that to them, and they can easily be replaced, like militarization of the electoral process. We have electoral offenses in the Act. How strong are the institutions? INEC is the one to prosecute electoral offenders. How many offenders have been convicted? When you have a law that has provisions but cannot be implemented, there's a problem. That is why people are canvassing, stakeholders, that we need the National Electoral Offences Commission to be able to take off that burden from INEC. If you look at what we have now, is a situation where, yes, you have given discount, but the atmosphere is such that women are already turned away. Now, you are going for campaigns. You are not sure you are returning. How many women want to go into that? You are going, you don't even know whether you are returning alive. You don't, so the entirety, okay, you have gotten nomination form, but you don't have the financial muscle to be able to, because that is not the end of it. And we don't have independent candidates.
All right.
So when you put all this together, you will discover that it is not enough to give discount. But there is need to strengthen the law to protect this vulnerable group in the interest of democracy.
Okay. Now let's actually talk about one of the provisions that actually touches us, the media practitioners. We've actually seen situations where some journalists were attacked or even maltreated at election polling units. Now and it says here that it should provide greater protection for media practitioners. Now how can this be addressed moving forward?
Yes, that is part of the EU report. And you know why it is necessary to provide protection for media practitioners. Because if information is not at the disposal of the electorate, then it is as good as non-participation. Because information is key. Now you are going out, there is trouble somewhere, you don't know, then your life is endangered. Apart from the information, entertainment, and enlightenment aspect of it, you discover that if the media practitioners are left at the mercy of criminals, then democracy, why do you think they say this is the fourth estate of the realm? The media is a fundamental component of democracy. They need protection. And how do you do this? Where there is information that they are going out, how are they protected? We have seen unfortunate situations where journalists are killed. One, we need to enlighten the people. Citizen education. Tell the people, these people are not political parties, they are not politicians. They are just reporting, bringing information to the doorsteps of Nigerians. Now, where they are adequately informed, they know their limits. And then apart from information, education of the people, security agencies. But that is another challenge. When you have security agencies that look compromised, then, because when you see some attacks, they are masterminded by political opponents, or let me say politicians, who feel that, look, what these people are coming to report may not be in our interest.
Right.
Knowing very well that, look, what they are reporting is just a matter of neutrality, not supporting anybody, but telling people this is what is happening.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, you look at the report, right? And for most people, two different things can be right at the same time. The glass can be half full, the glass can also be half empty. From 2015 to 2019 to 2023, a lot of people have said that we've made certain gains as far as our electoral process is concerned. From purging the register, from standardizing the electoral process itself, where we got rid of the incident forms, and now every voter has to be accredited using the BVN, I beg your pardon, using the BVAS, right, to proceed with elections and things like that. And everything should be verifiable based on the technology that we do have right now. Do you think that, even in as much as Nigerians remain unsatisfied with the election itself, not just because of the resources that were spent, but because of the sense that a lot of people feel that there's a lot of injustice or foul play in it, because clearly some of these election victories are being contested in our courts at the moment. Do you think that there are still some positives outside of the obvious negatives that we're talking about right now from the 2023 elections?
Yes, as I said earlier, INEC has shortcomings, but definitely we have to give it, we have to commend it in many areas. I mentioned election technology. The only place we had an issue was the presidential elections in terms of transmission of results. But if you look at the Osun election, for example, the use of BVAS, use of IREV, you know, these are things that go to credibility of elections. And if you look at metamorphosis of elections from 1999, you mentioned 2015, I think we have made progress. We had issues with smart card reader in the conduct of the 2015 elections. The court recognized it, but it was not backed by law. That has been done. It's a milestone. We now have a legal framework that provides for smart card reader or any other technological innovation or device that INEC deems fit. And that has given INEC that discretion to determine what kind of technology to use. This is a major achievement. And, you know, it has not stopped Nigerians from rushing to the tribunals, because it has become customary that no matter how well conducted an election is, the losing party or candidates will always view it as, you know, fraudulent. That is not to say that all the elections have been credible. But if you look at it, we have made progress. Right from the time of smart card reader to this era of BVAS, which is used for accreditation and transmission of results, to the IREV, the only challenge is we have spent a lot of money, a lot of resources, you know, gone into this election technology. What we saw in the 2023 general elections, with particular reference to the presidential election, should not have been witnessed with the kind of resources that went into it. But these are challenges that are surmountable. We have seen, you know, progress from 2015, you know, all the issues. That is why we have observation reports. So I am hopeful that with all the reports available to INEC, both from domestic and international observers, the challenges should be addressed. And when that is done, we'll witness incremental success in our electoral process.
All right, now in the report, right, the EU actually added that shortcomings in law and electoral administration hindered the conduct of well-run and inclusive elections and damaged the trust in INEC. Now, taking a look at, you know, this particular report and, you know, the cases flying around at the Elections Petitions Tribunal, would you actually say that, you know, does it speak against the results, you know, of the INEC and, you know, everything the INEC stands, the stand on INEC, you know, when you take a look at this particular report and also, you know, the cases, does this speak against the INEC?
No. You see, when you have these reports, the tribunals, these are judicial proceedings. And whatever is going on there does not have anything to do with the report.
Okay.
The courts work with evidence before them. Everything, every extraneous factor is excluded. So whatever reports the observers have brought out, we are published, does not have anything to do with the cases going on. They will not influence the decision of the courts, of the tribunals. And then, if you look at it, where the EU pointed out, see, for example, we are having an issue now with our constitutional provisions, especially two-third majority. When you have 25% in
the FCT.
Yes,
qualifies as a state or not?
Yes.
Right.
So, from legislative drafting perspective, we have seen certain things that ought to have resolved that issue. That, they were not there or are not there in the Constitution. So, he now throws the law to the judges to interpret. That's why we say legislators who make these laws should be meticulous. Because if you don't do, you can have an intent. Maybe the intention of the legislators is to make FCT part of the state, to make it a state, for the purpose of reckoning. And then the court may now hold otherwise because it is ambiguous. So what we are saying is that the legislators, the 10th Assembly has been inaugurated, they should be more meticulous than their predecessors in enacting laws, so that they don't leave interpretation, leave room for interpretation. And at the end of the day, you find out that what we have is what we are working with. So whatever report has been issued does not have any effect on the proceedings before the various tribunals, because they are extraneous.
Right. And you look at the report, right? While we're focusing a lot of the energy on the electoral umpire, because clearly they're responsible for conducting and organizing the election. So if things go wrong, it's natural to hold the person responsible for conducting it. But much of what has happened is within the political atmosphere in the country entirely. You talk about political parties, you talk about politicians themselves, the media, the police, and other stakeholders involved. Give me a sense of what you make of Nigerians and their contribution towards the advancement of our democratic process. Because while the EU EOM is commending Nigerians for coming out to vote en masse, the numbers speak to something else. Voter apathy is still a significant issue that we need to address if we're going to get this right. There is still millions of Nigerians who decided to sit back at home and not take part in this process, thereby taking away the value that those votes could have added to the entire process.
Yes, you can now link this with the trust, the level of trust that Nigerians have in
You think there's a nexus between...
There is. Because if I don't believe that my vote will count, then there's no need going to, waste my time all day. But then talking about another gain that we have made, that we have achieved. Now, we used to have, in the past, a situation where voters go through accreditation, then there is another time for voting, another queue. But
this
now,
time around, it's seamless.
Yes, it's seamless. So, blaming INEC is not exclusively the fault of INEC. Nigerians too have their parts, the citizens. When you go and start selling your vote, how does that have anything to do with INEC? But you also ask, why do Nigerians sell their votes? The law is there, criminalizing vote buying and selling. But Nigerians still do it because of certain factors. So it is now time for citizens to realize that having a credible election, as we all wish to have, is not the role and responsibility of INEC alone. Citizens too, stakeholders like political parties, political leaders, CSOs, the media, security agencies, even the citizens, it's a collective effort. When you compromise as a security official, you stand by and you watch, electoral offenses being committed, you are compromising. When you go and sell your vote or buy, you are compromising. When you give biased reports, you are compromising. As a political party, when you suppress, we have had instances where Nigerians cannot even explain how some candidates emerged. You are compromising. So at the end of the day, when they say, Abba, miracles are happening in our electoral firmament, how? So it is something that has to do with every one of us, both institutions and citizens.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for your time and also an in-depth analysis on the EU Observation Missions report this morning. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you very much for stopping by.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so you just listened to Dr. Sam Oguche. He's the coordinator, Center for Legislative Engagement, YAGA Africa. And with that, we've come to the end of Daybreak this beautiful Friday morning. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you. I'm Dasha and Husseina Usman. Have a wonderful weekend.
My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Thank you very much for your time and company. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you soon.